Hey everyone, welcome to Sociastrology. Today we are going to look at the year 2025 on a personal level. We're going to look at this from the context of your rising or sun signs to see how this year is going to play out for you personally. So we're going to go through the major transits for the year to decipher the most important factors for you. So we're going to look at Pluto in Aquarius, which has just permanently moved in November, and look at how that's going to play into the fact that Neptune, Uranus, and Saturn are all changing signs this year. So they're going to be in different houses in your chart than they have been for ages. And then we also will look at Jupiter and its ingress into Cancer to look at where that benefit and luck, goodwill is coming through for you next year. And we will also look at this big epic Mars retrograde process that we have just started going through and will be playing out for the whole first half of the year. And then we will look at the nodal axis and its sign change into Pisces and Virgo to see how the eclipses are likely to play out for you, with eclipses in Pisces, Virgo, and Aries within the context of your own personal chart. So this should play out. This should work perfectly for your rising sign. It could probably also hold for your sun sign as well, but also for a detailed description of what to expect in the coming year, do feel free to book a personal reading. What I do is I look at your natal chart, I go deeply into all of that, but then I use a lot of different timing techniques to see which eclipses are most likely to play out in a very poignant way for people. Whether or not their zodiacal releasing indicates that certain alignments are likely to play out and manifest in a specific way or not, and all of the transits to your own personal planets and so forth. So to really dig into this, I definitely recommend a personal reading, but this should hold really perfectly for your rising sign, and it will probably also apply for your sun sign as well. Additionally, for a mundane astrology general overview of the coming year, politically, historically, socially, I just published last week a really epically long video about that. So if you have the time and you are interested in how this year is also likely to play out on the world stage, I recommend checking that out too. And other than that, if you are new here, do please consider subscribing for future videos. I do topics like this, so the mundane astrology on the one hand, and then I tend to look at the exact same alignment or time frames from a personal standpoint and take it through all of the signs. So if that's something that is of interest to you, then do please feel free to subscribe. I would love to have you here for future videos. And if you don't mind hitting the thumbs up button, I would greatly appreciate that. It helps the video to spread around. It helps the channel to grow. So I am deeply, deeply grateful for all of that. And without any further ado, let's get into your reading. For Aries rising, we're going to have Pluto permanently in your 11th house now. This has been going back and forth between your 10th and your 11th over the past year or so. And it's now, again, permanently in your 11th house of friends, colleagues, allies, networking, groups of people that you're involved in, your hopes and dreams. And we also have next year the beginning of Saturn and Neptune moving into your first house of yourself, your motivation, your body, in part your health, but more or less you yourself. And we also have Uranus moving into your third house of communications, your neighborhood, your community, siblings, the people that you deal with day to day, and so on. So with Pluto in your 11th house, this is now orienting you toward having more power and influence within your social sphere. So this is going to play out both ways, both in terms of the influence of society and those around you on you personally, but then also your influence over those areas of your life, your social life, your hopes and dreams in and of themselves. And these matters as we're coming into the coming year. So this is something that you're going to have going on for about 20 years, but it's a new influence. So it's something that we want to pay attention to. Now, again, you also then have Saturn, which has a kind of reserving effect on you when it's in your first house upon your personality. You can become more authoritative, but also more reserved and more willing to kind of pull back your energy from front facing situations. So when you're dealing with people, you're more likely to pull back a bit when we have Saturn there. But paradoxically, you're also more likely to come across as more serious minded, more authoritative, more professional, things like this. Now, you also then have Neptune in that first house of yourself, which is really idealistic, and it can lend itself to things like confusion or even delusions, but it is very romanticizing of the area in which it's in, and it leads you through a feeling, not through tangible evidence. So your intuition in terms of your life direction will be really important in the coming years. Neptune will be here in your first house until 2039, but as I'll go through in a moment, these three, Saturn, Neptune, and Uranus, these are their first forays into these new houses. And so they will go retrograde for about 6 months. But we will get more into that in a moment. So this is something that you have going on until about 2039. And it's going to be important to see how it feels. Again, a focus on how it feels in the coming year in order to best orient yourself for the years to come so that you know more what you're dealing with rather than the influence of Neptune and Saturn on your 12th, which you're coming into the year with and which you've been experiencing for the past few years. So these together, they don't have a ton of overlap. In most ways, they're quite contradictory, but they do come together in some pretty specific ways. So these can include personal sacrifice with Saturn and Neptune, but also wisdom, knowledge, a sense of maturity, and a deep understanding that these two bring together. So this is something, these are both in terms of the sacrifice, but then also the wisdom angle of this, things that people will be picking up on from you, but also things that you'll be feeling within yourself as well. So now with Uranus moving into your third house, Uranus tends to bring a lot of change. It can bring a bit of an erratic energy. It can bring like sudden shocks and surprises and things like this that arise with Uranus too. But it also brings a new fascination, new things into your life that are fostering a sense of ideological or mental, what's the word that I'm looking for? Cognitive kind of growth. And in your third house, it's bringing a lot of these changes to your community, specifically your locality, but also even in terms of language, the way that you communicate with people and vice versa, as well as your relationship with people in your day-to-day life, including your siblings. But additionally, it changes your relationship with these things. So, and this can be for a few different reasons. It can be changing those things in and of themselves. So applying the concept of siblings to the third house, your sibling could be going through a big change, and that could stand on its own and just be something that you're dealing with, or that can change your relationship with them as well. Or it could even have an impact on you personally, your communication style, how you deal with people, the extent to which you have them really close within your life, or even at a distance within your life. This could be someone even moving closer to you. Now, additionally, because of the changes to the locality, I mean, this could play out in terms of zoning around you, for instance, or like the city or community or neighborhood just feeling like it's changing. And probably because it really is, but it could also play out as your locality changing because you're moving. Now, either way that this plays out, again, you're likely to have a very different relationship with that community and with your explorations around your local environment. Again, if this is because you're moving, then yeah, your commute is going to be different. Your stores are going to be different. Your neighborhood's going to be different. You're going to have new neighbors. But if it's a matter of your neighborhood changing, then this could be either a change in your commute, whether you drive or, for instance, take rail. This could also be a change in the rail lines or the what's it called, the specific lines and the way that they run. Um, this could also then impact, for instance, if you are having more influence over colleagues and so forth, if you're then moving into a different job, into a different position, then your commute would change based on the fact that you're literally going to a different building, you know? So this is how a lot of these things are likely to start playing out next year. We've had some previews of this Pluto, remember, in the past year and a half, but it's here now permanently, and we're starting to get a vision of what the coming years are going to be like as these planets move out of these placements. Now, again, I want to emphasize that these two, Saturn and Neptune, are coming out of your 12th house. And what happens when we have 12th transiting planets move from our 12th into our first is that often they can bring a whole bunch of stuff that we were unaware of that has to do with us. So it could bring up some subconscious fears, certainly with Saturn and Neptune. It could also, though, bring to your awareness a level of wisdom, understanding, intuition, a kind of spiritual orientation and a seriousness about that maybe you haven't conceived of consciously yet. It's just been something that's working or cooking in the background that you can kind of feel it, but again, it just hasn't really come to the forefront of your mind yet. So that could also be something that you're experiencing coming up, but this could also be psychological material that you're working through, where you may again have felt kind of in the background like there's something going on, like you're kind of processing things, and that could then be laid in your lap in some way where you're then just very aware of what all of these changes that you've been going through in recent years have meant for you. That's one thing that's really fascinating about having Neptune, especially right there, right in your first house, where you're able to access it a little bit more directly, is that often we don't have that kind of a relationship with Neptune. Neptune is very nebulous. It's really hard to put your finger on what it's doing and why, because again, it doesn't work with tangible evidence. Saturn does for sure. But with Neptune, it's more of a feeling. So if you've been feeling like and putting effort into working through that subconscious psychological material, that is very likely to the effects of that are very likely to become very apparent to you in the coming year and going forward. And also, this is pretty nice. I'd rather have Uranus in the third than in the second, and here's why. So the second house has to do with your finances and your security, your resources, also even your self-image. So with Uranus moving into the third, it's starting to finally move out of your second house after 7 years that it's been there, wreaking quite a bit of havoc. Now, it's Uranus isn't all bad. It's just that it's not conducive to the second house being what we typically want from it. So we want that security from the second house, especially for you with your kind of natural lying houses here. With that second house in Taurus, you want to know that the ground underneath you is solid. You want to know that your standing is really good. You want to be very, very sure of yourself because of the fact that you need to take action quickly. With Aries prominent in your chart, pardon, you need to have that surety of footing of Taurus in the second house, and even your finances. We want for these things to at least have a baseline. We don't mind when Uranus brings in the really nice things of, oh, I wasn't expecting that money, or, oh, I wasn't expecting that raise. But it's when it kind of kicks the stool out from under you occasionally, that's what we don't love about it. And so with that moving into your third, it's more of kind of an up in the air, changeable place as it is. It involves other people, it's communication oriented. It's like, yeah, your city isn't fully in your control. So we know that things can change around there. It's when we're dealing with our own sense of security that's getting a bit of a roller coaster ride, that's more frustrating. And that's been the past 7 years for you. So with that moving into your third, these are definitely better places for these planets to be in terms of just the general human comfort level. They're more accessible. You have recently had these two not in alignment with the first house, and then also the second house is not really in alignment with the first. So it's kind of like there's been a lot that's been going on in your life in recent years that hasn't just been completely within the realm of your control. And so that in and of itself can be quite frustrating. Even though Pluto in the 10th, that wouldn't have been too terrible of a transit. It would have been pretty transformative of your career over the past 16, I want to say, years, approximately since 2008. But other than that, it can definitely increase your power and your authority within the workplace. But yeah, so going through some of these points that I've made on the slide about these, again, there's that increased influence on and of society, the environment, people in the daily life. So again, there's the two sides of this. There's your influence on people, on the groups around you as well, but then also your ability to change the environment around you and to impact the people that you deal with day to day, where they may be a little bit surprised by some of the changes that you're making, but it's likely going to be somewhat welcomed. I think people are going to be pretty open to change in the coming years with this Uranus and Gemini anyway. And what's so interesting about Aries is that, again, all of the signs kind of line up with similar themes as the houses do. So communication, education, our localities, our cities, our transportation systems, so on and so forth, our languages, the way that we deal with language, the way that we deal with each other, that's all in general in the world likely to be changing with Uranus and Gemini anyway. So, I wouldn't feel too bad if you are making changes that are impacting other people as well. That's, just kind of par for the course with the transits that you have. Now, also, becoming a leader in your community or work, being seen as authoritative. So with these two here, again, as I mentioned, one of the areas in which they come together is a sense of sacrifice. And with Pluto in your 11th, that can be a strong pull toward a cause, something that you care about to a great extent, possibly something through which you want to have an impact on your community. You want to change something in the world around you, at the very least, if not even more broadly speaking. And so you could be coming through as a leader in your community around that. But again, there's a bit of a shaky identity here with Saturn and Neptune in your first. So I would really encourage for you to not lean in too hard to that. Things may be a little bit unclear starting in the spring as these two start to move into your first house. And it'll feel, it'll feel a little like unfamiliar because you haven't dealt with these transits before. Neptune has never been in your first house before since you've been alive. And so this can be a little bit shaky, but try not to let it throw you off too much. You will learn how to work with this in the coming years here. So try not to worry too much, and try not to underestimate yourself when it comes to dealing with other people as well. That's one of the big warnings that was coming through to me about this alignment for you, especially because you can be relating with powerful people when we have Pluto in the 11th house as well. So yeah, sorting out your identity in the coming years, I would just put some thought on that. Don't put too much pressure on yourself about that in the coming year. This is just, we're dipping our toes in the water with these new transits in this year. Just feel it out. Just kind of see uh, where is it that you feel like there are things about you that are dissolving away, that you're maturing out of with these almost very wise elder type of energy that comes with Saturn and Neptune together. There can be a major maturation process. And so you may feel like things are just kind of falling away. And I would let that happen. I would let that be something that you're pretty comfortable with experiencing. And definitely don't resist it. That's one of the most important things with transits, is that we don't want to look ahead to what's coming in order to try to avoid it. That never goes well. So what we want to do is we want to see what's coming, be aware of it, see how can we work with it, again focusing on this kind of wisdom, knowledge, increased authority, increased influence, kind of orientation of the transits that you have come up. Try to express it that way, and that's how you can avoid some of the more complicated or frustrating aspects of a transit that's coming up. Is try to actively direct it in a way that is productive and proactive. Definitely don't try to avoid it. So now, also with these alignments, this could feel, because these are pretty important areas of our life. It's like our social relationships in both of these houses, and then us. So how we're relating to others, but not necessarily in like a romantic context or like with our parents. This is more out in the world. Who it is that we deal with in our everyday day-to-day life, and then us and how we see ourselves within that. So you could really feel the need to overhaul, completely change your life, completely change your location, make a big move like that. And part of the impetus behind that, I would recommend thinking this aspect of it through. How much of that is caused by a desire to purify your relationships? And if you feel like you're at all on the fence about those changes, and what it is that you feel like is pushing you over the edge and making you want to just go and do that, what aspects of that can you change in your current location? Could you change that? Could you bring new people with Uranus here in your third into your life, where those relationships would align with you a little bit more, or make you feel like people that aren't quite resonating with you anymore are, sorry, I forgot how I started that sentence. To decrease the level of reliance on them as your friends and the people that you hang out with, and so on and so forth. Like, can you bring new people in if you feel like you're on the fence about making a huge change? Can you tweak around the edges and satisfy this Uranus that way? That may be a good way to play with this transit in the coming year, while again we're just kind of dipping our toes in the water and seeing how things feel. I wouldn't recommend making a huge change just this year, because that's really fast when we're talking about a Uranus transit. That's taken the first little bit of it and going all in terms of like, screw it all, I'm just going to move to a different city and completely change everyone I know, kind of thing. So at least put that off until 2026, I think, if it's a knee-jerk kind of feeling for you. But this is also likely to, again, bring in changes and increase in communication, surprising communication. When this goes retrograde, you could totally hear, and it'll go retrograde many times, I think about 7 or 8 times throughout this transit. during those times, you may get some like blast from the past kind of communications coming in, and I really would not be surprised about that. We will get the first retrograde of this, just if you're curious, that'll come up in the autumn of 2025. So something like that could come up around that time as well. But the way that you communicate with others, the way that others are communicating with you, things like this can be changing, but also then increasing, like in speed and volume, so to say. I would also plan for and try to avoid technological breakdowns, also mechanical, especially when it comes to cars when we're dealing with the third house. I would try not to ignore issues along those lines because you can get a big, not so fun surprise along those lines. So if your phone is acting funky, I would not just assume, well, I'm going to get lots of warnings before it totally craps out on me and then wind up in a situation where you really need your phone and that's when it breaks down or something like this. So, yeah, I would just try and keep that in mind, make sure that if those things start to creep up on you, that you don't sweep them under the rug. Because again, then that's an avoidance of the transit. And usually it's when we're avoiding them that they tend to kick pretty hard and kind of throw surprising challenges in our face. So there can also then be, I think, like I was alluding to a moment ago, a major change within your locality. And that can be the locality around you or that move where literally your city is changing because you're in a different city. And additionally, like I was saying with your siblings, if a sibling changes, it can have an impact on you and on your relationship with them. That can also play out with friends in the third house as well. But I think that's a lot of what I wanted to cover for those guys. So let's speak to Jupiter and Mars. I would not emphasize Mars this year because of the fact that it's going through a really long retrograde period, and those are not the most common for Mars. We only get a Mars retrograde every couple of years, and it is an epic one. It tends to take like 8 months at least to clear. So we're experiencing most of that, pardon, with Mars in Cancer. Now, what's nice about that is that then we have Jupiter move into Cancer, and that can really clean up a lot of the fallout that may have occurred within this area of our lives after the fact. So that's quite nice, is that Jupiter's coming along. It'll start to bring some ease to this area that Mars probably shook up a bit. So when we're dealing with a Mars transit, what we're dealing with is something that probably requires a lot more effort on our part and brings in more annoyances, things that like kind of get under our skin and piss us off a little bit. But it can also bring challenges and even like minor misfortune, like something breaking down. And it's like, well, that didn't need to break down. Why did it do that during this time? It can also bring in conflict, like arguments and breakdowns of relationships and things like this as well. So these are all things to kind of keep in mind when we're dealing with Mars. And for the first half, really, all the way until the very end of April, we are going to be experiencing that long Mars retrograde in Cancer. And so that's going to be in your fourth house of home and family. So this is another area where I wouldn't overlook any potential issues that you see arising, because they could get worse if you ignore them. There could be some conflict or issues that arise within the context of the physical home, your property, and real estate. If you are looking to buy, there's a really good time to do that this year and a potentially super complicated time. So I would try hard not to do that before May, certainly. And I would aim actually for a little bit into June, when you get Jupiter finally into This is from early June, this line up here. And once we get Jupiter into the fourth, then things become very lucky in that area of your life of home, family, property, roots. Things just kind of go easier, more easily than we would normally expect. Whereas there's more complications than we normally expect when we have Mars in an area. So post June, if you are at all interested in property or real estate, signing a lease or anything like that, moving in with someone. But this can also play out in the first half of the year as like arguments with family. There could be drama for sure within your family. There could be issues again with property, unexpected expenses when it comes to your home. There could even be a sense of unease, generally speaking, around your home or around your family. So that's just something to keep in mind. I would really try to avoid arguments with family, and buying or selling any sort of property, because there's likely to be unforeseen complications along those lines. Now, and that could also play out with your roots. So, in terms of like ancestry or family traditions or things like this, that can also feel like something that is irritating and that you may just not resonate with. And the then be feeling authentic to yourself by changing that up could then become a conflict or a source of conflict with the family. So these are just things to almost try and lay low with, in the first half of the year. And then it gets a lot better in June forward. And that'll be from June of 25 actually through about June of 26. So then we start to get a lot of benefit, a lot of luck, a lot of ease, and things just going quite well. Pleasant surprises, really nice experiences in that area of home and family from that point forward. So fortunate relationships with, even benefits that come from family or that you're able to offer to family, a general ease to those relationships in the second half of the year. You could then be upgrading or improving your home. Jupiter really likes to improve on things. It likes to make things better. And so with that playing out in your fourth house, it's very likely that that opportunity will present itself to you and that you can take that on as a successful and probably easier than expected, although probably also a bigger than expected project along the lines of home improvement or changing things up within your home. Jupiter can overdo things, so it can make things a lot bigger. So do try and be aware of the parameters and the guardrails on any sort of project that you start, because it's likely to spin out then into other projects and other improvements. There's nothing wrong with that, but just I think kind of being aware ahead of time of the fact that you might be in for more than you would expect if you engage in any of that. You could also find that if you would like, for instance, property to be appraised higher, I would recommend aiming for the second half of the year. But, I actually wouldn't if you're wanting it to be appraised low. So, because this is going to go up, it can be fortunate, but it's likely to increase that value that's appraised. So just something to keep in mind, that might be one of the few areas where this would not be the best influence on that. But even the straightforward value of your property, the value within your neighborhood and so forth could be on the rise. And of course, if you're renting, then that's not the most fun, but that could also be an area where, because Jupiter makes things bigger, that might be an area that's less of the what we would consider favorable ways that Jupiter in the fourth could play out. Yeah, very likely spending more time at home, really enjoying your home, enjoying that personal time, that comfort, and also potentially with your family or people that feel really, really close to you. And of course, this goes to your roots in terms of this being what's considered the anchor, the bottom of the chart there. This also deals with root chakra kind of oriented topics of where we come from, that base level of the origin story, so to say, that we tell ourselves, feeling really secure about that, feeling really comfortable within that context. In the latter half of the year. So it's also really nice to just have this, what we call angular. So the first, fourth, seventh, and 10th are especially important houses because they're on these angles. And having that Jupiter very strong in your chart as a transit should increase its influence as well. Now, when it comes to the eclipses, we have the nodal axis is switching signs. The nodal axis always goes backwards, like this around the chart, and whereas the planets come around in a counterclockwise motion. So this is always retrograde. It just came from Aries backward into Pisces. So the nodal axis is the area in which the sun and the moon align, where the sun sometimes goes down, of course, to the southern hemisphere. So does the moon every month. For the sun, it's yearly. For the moon, it's monthly. This is the area in which those changes, those fluctuations align. And so this is what causes eclipses, because it brings the sun into alignment with the moon and with the earth. And so this is where we get those eclipses, is based on where this nodal axis is. This is that cross section there. So with this moving into Pisces, we're starting to get eclipses that are along this Pisces Virgo axis. And we do tend to look a little bit more at the north node than the south node, just because of their nature. So the north node tends to bring increase and a necessary increased focus for the sake of your own maturation, your own growth. Whereas the south node should definitely not be underestimated, but it does tend to decrease things or loosen our grip on those things, or request for us to let something go for our own growth. So that's why we tend to focus on the north node a little bit more, but it is an axis. So this means that for about a year and a half, as this nodal axis is in these signs, that there's going to be a focus for you on taking care of mental, emotional, and physical health for yourself, because we're dealing with the 12th and the 6th houses, especially focusing in on the mental and emotional health. This is likely clearing up some of those subconscious patterns and that psychological material that has suddenly come into your conscious awareness. With this north node then moving backward into that 12th house, this can help you to further process that, further develop your understanding of your own subconscious and in the upcoming years as well, based on what you've picked up on from Saturn and Neptune moving into your first. There's also then, again, with the North Node in the 12th house, there's a greater focus on spiritual concerns. And with the South Node in Virgo, then there's a little bit less of a focus requested for the mundane. Now, it may come up in little shocks, the mundane, but you're being asked to release a lot of those things. So there is a major need for time for yourself. So I would try and carve that out of your daily routine, which is associated with the 6th house, the tasks that you have, the chores, the errands, the work that you do, the tasks that you undertake. That's all 6th house. You're being asked here to make some room within all of that for yourself, for a little bit of isolation, to process things for you, to focus on you. But kind of paradoxically, with the nodal axis and these eclipses coming up along your 12th and 6th house axis here, you're likely to feel a desire to be of service to others, because this is what we call these two houses, the service axis. So that's going to be something to balance with you trying to create time for yourself, and then also with the orientation toward a cause and a wanting to make your mark that's playing out in your first house, and then Uranus in the third being like, I really want to make changes. You could feel that a big part of that is wanting to be of service to others, but do try and balance all of that out with making sure that you have enough time for yourself. And again, like I was saying, that you're not sacrificing yourself too much for a cause, so to say, with Saturn and Neptune in your first and that Pluto in your 11th house there. Now, we will get in the spring, because this nodal axis is so close to Aries, the solar eclipse in the springtime is actually going to catch in Aries. And that's going to be at about 9 degrees even of Aries there. So in the springtime, there's going to be a maturing perspective on yourself and personal breakthroughs that are likely around that period of time, especially if that eclipse is hitting any sensitive points in your chart. And I can, of course, look at that for you in a personal reading. But basically, again, what this is emphasizing is a need to focus on yourself rather than others, especially in the springtime. So if you're wanting to get involved in a cause or something like this, I would put it off a little bit more beyond the spring, so that whatever it is that needs to get sorted around you and how you're feeling with yourself around this time, that you're able to do that and to not feel like you don't have the time for yourself. That's going to be really important in especially the first half of the year, but then moving forward, it'll come up again around the spring and autumn as we start to have these eclipses in these houses as well. But yeah, I think that is pretty much what I have for you, Aries. So with all of that said, I hope you have an absolutely beautiful year. And again, if you want to go into this in more detail, do feel free to book a personal reading. I would love to look into how all of these transits are playing out in your own individual chart. And again, if you don't mind hitting the thumbs up button, greatly, greatly, greatly appreciate that. And feel free to subscribe for future videos. I would love to have you here. And yeah, other than all of that, I again hope you have an absolutely beautiful year. And I will talk to you all soon. Be good. Bye.